Well, listen, everybody, the new Barbara Walters Tells Me Everything documentary is bringing up all of these, remember, uncomfortable questions that she would lob at her guests over all those years, like asking Barbara Streisand, why haven't you had your nose fixed? Or maybe pressing Ricky Martin about his sexuality. So it kind of got us thinking, going back in the archives with Barbara, are these invasive questions, were they ever fair to ask? Are they still fair to ask today?
I mean, I think you can't put all of the questions in the same basket. I think some of those questions, though, were invasive, and I think that they still would be, maybe more so today. I think it's one thing if she's, and she did have many times where she was interviewing politicians, likely CEOs of companies. Asking those hard-hitting questions are things that we expect and we need from good journalists, and she was great at that. Yeah. She actually once asked Vladimir Putin, if he'd ever had ordered a hit on anyone. She actually regretted asking this question, because it is a bit of a crazy question, like as if he's going to admit that. He, of course, said no. But I think that it's interesting to hold those types of people to task. I don't think we needed to know whether or not, like, why Barbara Walters didn't have her nose done. Or
Barbara Streisand.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Barbara Streisand. Yeah, so I think that that feels like an inappropriate question. If Barbara started talking about her nose and like was saying, like, I thought about it, well, why didn't you? Maybe it was an extension of it. I don't totally know.
But even if everyone cares about it, like, I think it's an interesting piece, right? I think it's easy to boo and be like, how dare she ask this? But she was asking about many of the things that people were talking about. You know, when I think about this, and, you know, we mentioned Ricky Martin in the intro, that's one of the interviews she's been widely criticized for asking about his sexuality. So I just kept thinking, how did he feel? And I managed to find a recent interview of him and Andy Cohen talking about it. Did you hear what he said at the end?
Yes.
She was doing her job. Everybody was asking that question. So that, to me, was very interesting.
But it's his choice to come out when he wanted to come out.
But he can answer, but he can choose to answer or not answer.
Don't you think that's what you sign up for when you sit down across from Barbara Walters? She did not do softball interviews. She asked those hard questions. And I don't know about you guys, but I miss those specials. I miss sitting down because she was asking those questions that I wanted to hear the answer, but I did not have the testicular fortitude to ask those questions.
You mean myself. The labial fortitude?
Yes,
the ovarian fortitude.
I would never, but I love that she asked because she was talking to people that we were all talking about at the time. And maybe now, because we're very PC, I think it's easy to look back and judge her for the questions that she asked because we dare not ask those questions today. But I think we need to keep in mind, for those of us who are not in the industry, I wonder the type of pressure she was under, right? Not just for the audience who wants that answer, but for the executive producers that we don't see who are like, we have this primetime special. You have to ask Ricky Martin about his sexuality or we have no special. That's the part that I don't think people would understand. And I also, anybody who thinks her questions were too tough, I dare you to ask yourself, if she asked a bunch of cutesy softball questions, would we be talking about Barbara Walters today?
I think there's a way to do it, though. I'll just say before, because you, of course, have been in the news world. So this is a slightly different thing, news versus, like, entertainment. Like, I feel like there's some delineation to be made there. Oprah Winfrey, who we all love and adore, who also asked a lot of hard-hitting questions in her career. She once did this famous interview with Prince, of course, big fan. And it was an amazing get because he didn't do a lot of interviews, and it was right after the death of his son. And it was at Paisley Park Studios, and his then wife came out, and she did not ask the question that everyone was wondering about. Now, why didn't she do that? I don't know if Oprah's ever talked about this, but I imagine it was because she had a relationship, and that is so sensitive.
So do you feel like she did her job by not asking?
Yes, she did her job because how she dealt with it was she included it in the piece as a voiceover of, like, he had recently lost.
But you bring up a good point. She was the boss of her own show, so she could make that call, whereas Barbara had a boss who was overlooking going, we have a primetime special, baby. You got to ask that question.
Listen, I wish those specials would come back, but I think with the dawn of social media, guess what? Big-time celebrities, they don't have to do these interviews anymore. And in fact, I don't even know what journalists we now know are filling the shoes of the Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyers. Diane Sawyers isn't even doing Diane Sawyer interviews, you know? Those days are gone. And if you take a look at the caliber of celebrities, they have decided they are bigger than these interviews. So Beyonce, she doesn't sit down for interviews anymore. Taylor Swift? Anybody? No, she doesn't do those interviews anymore. Zendaya. There's a whole long list of superstars, and guess what? It's up to them now with social media. They get to control the story. They get to control the narrative. They get to control what they want us to know about them. So I'm really sad because I think the days of the big interview is over, and I'm really sad about that.
Yeah, me
See,
too.
I sort of disagree. Like, Alex Cooper, she's on a $165 million Sirius XM Spotify deal. She gets Gwyneth Paltrow to open up about her sex life and who was better in bed, Brad Pitt or Ben Affleck, right? She gets Jane Fonda to open up about her bulimia, and I know you might not qualify her as a journalist, but I think there are content creators who've stepped into that void. Podcasters have stepped into that void. So I do think we are getting some of those information.
We're getting interviews 1,000%, but I think we have to always hold journalism in a different light. Alex Cooper does what Alex Cooper does. That's the Call Her Daddy podcast. But if you think that she's going to sit down and ask Gwyneth Paltrow, what is the legitimacy of all the stuff that you push that has no scientific backing? That question's not coming from Alex Cooper.
But I also think, like, I know that you don't distinguish her as a journalist, and I think there's many people who agree with you. But in this day and age, I don't know that people on their phones are like, not a journalist, not going to watch, journalist going to watch.
Yeah,
I don't know that they make that distinction.
I don't think we do. I think the hardball questions and the difficult, uncomfortable questions come from people who are supposed to be sitting in an unbiased position. Alex Cooper's there to make those stars look good.
And let's remember, she's only talking to celebrities. She's not talking to politicians and newsmakers.
I mean, she
and
talked to
people
Kamala Harris.
Sure, when Kamala was trying to campaign for the president of the United States, but I'm talking like on a regular basis. Is she talking to Putin? Will Putin ever sit down with her? I doubt it.
Hey, you, come a bit closer. We've got so many more must-see interviews, spicy debates, lifestyle tips, and pop culture moments. So subscribe to our channel by tapping the logo below and don't miss out.